Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome back to the Atlas Fanfic channel, the go-to fanfiction channel on YouTube. Today I'm back with a new fanfiction. What if I was reborn in Naruto as a Prodigy, Hyuga, and Kaguya? This story follows a Naruto fan dying and being reborn in Naruto during the Third Great Ninja War era. He resolves to grow strong enough to survive the Naruto series and achieve immortality. He has been dealt a good hand and won't let this opportunity pass him, as he will go through any means to achieve his goals. This story is amazing and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Check out my other fanfictions, they're all fire. And with that being said, let the tale begin. Chapter 1, Revised. I, like most humans, didn't think about how I would die. I knew I would die someday, but I certainly didn't think it'd be Truckun cutting my life short at the age of 20. Before Truckun had struck me down, I had just finished my stint in college, studying to be an electrical engineer. My life was going well. I was on my way to getting a job, making some cash, maybe finding that special someone and settling down. But before my life even started, it ended. It was tragic, or at least I'd like to think so. As I was laying on the street, conscious fading, I looked around and saw no help in sight. Truckun slowly, mockingly, driving away, my world starting to get dark. I was upset but accepted that there would be no tomorrow for me. I wouldn't see my brothers, my dog, my mother. All the things I loved gone, out of my reach. I haven't seen my father in like a month. I wish I had spent more time with him, was my last thought as my world faded to black. But then I was reborn. My world didn't end as I expected it to. One moment I took my last breath and the next I took my first. Everything blurred, and with a cold intake of air and blurry vision I could hear what sounded like footsteps and the chatter of a crowd. I spent time fading in and out of conscious, trying and failing to discover where I had been reborn. I was an above-average student, nothing of note, there's plenty of those. I lived in the city, so I took the bus to and from college. I had 3 brothers, parents that separated, nothing special in 2020. So why was I reincarnated? It wasn't something I wished for or deserved, but it seems that was how it was going to be. Time passed and my vision improved and sounds became more audible, and with my improved senses, I discovered where I'd been reborn. Looking at my mother's blank white eyes, the constant mumbled Hyuga-sama from what must have been branch members as my mother passed them, I'm most likely a Hyuga. Hopefully, not a branch member, were my last thoughts as I drifted off to sleep. My first birthday came with lots of revelations. First, I wasn't a branch member. I'm the grandson of a recently deceased elder. My mother, being his only daughter, kept her from being sealed and will hopefully keep me from being sealed as well. Second, I likely wasn't a full Hyuga. I was half Kaguya. From what I could hear from the gossiping branch members, my mother was captured by some hidden mist ninja when she was on a mission with her Jinin team. She returned wounded as the only survivor after 2 weeks of torture and integration. From what I could hear, my white hair was quite the hot topic among the Hyuga, many speculating that more than interrogation happened when she was captured. But from what I can tell, Mom has kept quiet so far and claimed that my father was a Konohanin, so it remains speculation so far. 3. I found out my name, Shiro Hyuga. As sad as that sounds, my interaction with my mother was minimal. She rarely came to see me, and when she did, she just stared at me, neither picking me up nor changing me when my diapers were soiled, leavening that job to the branch members, who also didn't talk around me, leavening me starved for attention and lacking in vocabulary. My birthday was a quiet affair, as most Hyuga birthdays are, my mother holding me for the first time in months and carrying me around, showing me to the elders and the clan head, none of who I recognized as Hyuga members from Naruto's time, likely putting me somewhere between the first and third Shinobi War. While being carried around, my thoughts wandered. I thought about the future, what I could achieve, what I could and what I should do. Time passed as time does. I turned 2. I started blabbering as much as possible to every available source, probably annoying the branch members taking care of me. I developed motor skills and started to run around. I also started playing with my chakra and trying to unlock either of my bloodlines, hoping to get an advantage early on. I experimented with pushing chakra to my eyes, bones, and generally just circulating it around my body, trying to train my control with very little success. Time passed and I became 3 and I was almost certain I didn't have the Shikatsu Myaku. I spent a considerable amount of time sending chakra to my bones and was met with no success. But I did have a healing factor. I fell and broke my arm while wall climbing in my room, and within minutes my arm was fully healed. When the branch members came and examined my arm, they didn't find a problem even though I heard a snap. I was dismissed as a child overreacting and the incident was over with. I'd had minor success with the Byakugan. I was able to activate it but was unable to see more than 1 meter around myself. As it was, it limited my vision more than it helped, but it did allow me to see my chakra network from the neck down and had been a great help in making me conscious of my chakra and subsequently controlling it. Yet more time passed. I became 4 and started officially training, doing light exercise, katas, and chakra control with the other Hyuga children. I stood out like a sore thumb, a mop of straight white hair among a crowd of black. Most of the children avoided talking to me, which was fine but disheartening nonetheless. This might be a prelude to my future in the Hyuga clan. So far nothing has endeared me to them and I don't think anything will. I spent about 3 weeks training and I was soon called a prodigy. My taijutsu was nothing special yet, but my physical strength, stamina, and ability to control my chakra was noticed very quickly and put me well above the other Hyuga kids training with me. I outclassed them all in all areas during the lesson, so it was decided I was to be separated from the rest of the children and given a personal instructor from the branch family to take over my training from then on. Nothing much seemed to change in my life after that. I got faint praise from my mother at "good work, you're doing the clan proud," and a pat on my head after she watched my training, and that was it. She remained distant and uninterested in my life, but that was fine. I already had a mother and I didn't blame her for disliking her rape baby. Yet more time passed. I trained all day until with my new teacher Takuma until I was unable to move. I was promptly patched up by my healing factor during a break, in which Takuma would go over tenketsu positions, organ placement, and where to strike to inflict the most damage with our taijutsu. Afterward I was told to train more. So, I did exactly that, not wasting any time. I repeatedly asked to be taught medical jutsu and was shot down, again and again. Finally, I was told I needed better control, but when I proved myself by passing Takuma's control test, water walking, I was told up front that it was unbecoming for main branch members to learn useless skills like medical ninjutsu. Ugh. I continued my pursuit of medical ninjutsu. I constantly badgered my teacher about how I wanted to use medical ninjutsu to heal myself and train more and the Hyuga clan proud, but was met with 0 success. So, I gave up for the time being, promising to come back to medical jutsu, trusting my healing factor to get me through until I start the academy. Days passed. I continued my training, using the evening to experiment on my own with my Byakugan, following the path my chakra took through my brain and through my eyes, increasing the flow in tiny increments in different parts of my brain and eyes, being extremely careful and desperately praying to any deities above, hoping to avoid injury. I was met with success when I realized I could change the scope of my vision, changing the almost 360-degree vision to the normal 170 degrees. Using the narrow field of vision, I could see much farther and could still see chakra and through walls. Overjoyed with my success, I continued to experiment with my Byakugan and brain, and soon discovered that I could slow my perception, which was a huge win. In my books, it's almost like I got a discount Sharingan. I couldn't stop smiling for days afterward. I continued experimenting, hoping to find some way to improve my memory by further my brain enhancements with chakra, but my luck had run out. I got cocky and tried going off the already automatic chakra paths that the Byakugan used and started to try enhancing different areas of my brain. That stunt landed me a week in the hospital and a stroke as a result. I had to weave a story about trying and succeeding in awakening my Byakugan but getting distracted and pushing too much chakra into my eyes. The story was tentatively bought by the doctors, not earning much more than a hum from my mother. Sadly, or perhaps not sadly, my healing factor was noted during my stay. My release from the hospital was uneventful, strict orders not to train without supervision, and I was on my way, only taking a second to note the number of faces on the Hokage monument. My training resumed, this time with much stricter, with more physical workouts, spars, and with medical ninjutsu and Byakugan lessons in between. Sadly, This was cutting into my free time, but it was welcome as I had no one to spend time with and decided that I probably should stop messing with my brain for the time being. Or at least until I was sure my healing factor or medical ninjutsu could reverse any damage I'd done to myself, which would likely be far into the future. Thus, I continued my harsh new daily training. I was experimenting with my perception and byakugan when I had free time, but not daring to venture into the unknown in my brain. The training wasn't fun, but it put me ahead of the rest of my age mates and further cemented my prodigy status, which I needed as I had plans and aspirations. For those to come to fruition, I needed strength. I was practically given the best possible start for a second life. With both the Hyuga and Kaguya blood, I had a chance of awakening the Tenseigan and the Shikatsu Myaku in the future. There was no need for body snatching, no Hashirama cells. I had a lot of potential at my fingertips, and I intended to use every second I had and every resource provided to climb my way to the top and possibly to eternal life. I had plenty of ambition and plenty of potential. I hoped to use it to make the most of my new life in the Naruto verse. 1-456 Chapter 2, Revised. I recently turned 5. I spent most of the year having the gentle fist burnt into my body and mind, muscles torn, then healed and refined by my healing factor. This gave me extremely good strength and stamina for my age. Just recently Takuma moved on to the 8 trigrams, declaring my gentle fist passable after months and months of work. The 8 trigrams are not just one technique, there are more than 10 8 trigram moves, 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven, 8 trigrams 16 palms, 8 trigrams 32 palms, and so on so forth. The 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven being the one Niji was called a genius for using was sadly not available to me. Takuma explained that it was only for the clan head and heir to learn and not taught every main clan member. I decided that as cool as creating a giant dome of chakra was, it was probably draining and better in the first place to not be hit, so I decided to put it out of my mind and focus on the rest of the 8 trigrams and come back to it later. The 8 trigrams use the Hyuga's innate ability to expel chakra from every tenketsu in their body. Blah blah blah. Takuma never seemed to tire of his voice, sometimes explaining things like I was retarded or something. Seriously, Takuma could blabber on all day. I sometimes thought about asking for a new teacher, but Takuma was the best taijutsu expert the Hyuga had, not counting the clan head, so I put it out of my mind and mentally prepared myself for years of mind-numbing teaching done by the stoic yet talkative Takuma. My time spent being taught by Takuma was cut short and replaced with standard, math, reading, and calligraphy, or royal pain, but nowhere near as bad as the clan's propaganda-filled history lessons. Thankfully, I'm not being tested on history, so I've managed to make up for some lost time by practicing with my chakra as well as trying to find other ways to make up for lost time. What I came up with was asking for weights or weighted seals if they existed. My idea of weighted seals was approved, then immediately vetoed by my mother of all people, who unbeknownst to us was quietly watching my training that day. She said a soft but firm no. You'll stunt his growth, and then left walking off slowly. A visibly nervous Takuma let out a sigh of relief, and I blew an annoyed breath out of my nose, wondering what her deal was. Did she care? I decided that it was not worth the thought and dropped it. Days passed and I continued to study and train, making great progress in my taijutsu, but mediocre progress in my reading, writing, and calligraphy. It was slow going, but I trudged forward and slowly made progress, and soon it was decided that I could go to the academy and not embarrass the Hyuga clan, as my mother had put it, and so off I went to the academy. The academy is quite large and is comprised of several buildings. The building had that iconic tree in front of it with a swing on it and a giant sign with the kanji for fire on the top center tower of the building. I left my mother with a quiet goodbye and left towards the interior of the school. Something I didn't know myself was that the academy and the Hokage's office were in the same building, perhaps to protect future generations. The classrooms in the academy are unnecessarily large and have high ceilings, perhaps so the chunin don't feel trapped and have a good old PTSD episode and murder-rape a group of children. I choked back a chuckle at the thought as I meandered my way to the far corner of the room, happy that I could claim the protagonist's seat by the window. I had hoped for a grand entrance ceremony with the Hokage giving his fabled speech about the will of fire, but my hopes were unmet. There was only a grumpy-looking genin taking your name and telling you what classroom you were in. I took my seat, ignoring the room of squealing 5-year-olds, and looked out the window and drifted into idle thought. Recently my mother handed me a book and told me to read it. Being the good son I am, I started reading the book that night. The book was about a nin that was protecting a rich merchant family. Anyway, the nin and the family were hiding in a hidden room in their manor, trying to stay undiscovered, but the family had a baby and the baby was crying and making noise, doing what babies do. And so the story goes, the nin made a hard decision and snapped the baby's neck. Sadly, that's not the worst part. The worst part is that they were still found regardless. The book was a bummer, but I get the idea. Sometimes you have to make a decision that will break you, and even then it will perhaps be meaningless in the end. Not a lesson a 5-year-old should get, but I appreciate it nonetheless. In front of the blackboard is a podium, situated far from the students' desks, and put in a position where the teacher can view everyone. Standing at the podium is one average and forgettable ninja, staring quietly and waiting for the class to notice him. I meanwhile took my time to look at my classmates. There were quite a few familiar faces: Kakashi, Asuma, and a very ugly young Mike guy who was quite loudly shouting about youth. I figured Kakashi was way younger than Obito and Rin. Maybe they meet when he gets moved up a grade? Okay brats, quiet down. For that matter, why am I the same age as Kakashi? That's suspiciously well timed, no doubt the work of whatever reincarnated me here. Other than that, nothing of note has happened. The days trickled on by, my training continued, as did the academy classes. So far I've got the gentle fist, and some variations of the 8 trigrams under my belt. I've also learned the mystical palm technique and the diagnostic technique, but other than that the jutsu I can call on during a battle is limited, as I focused mainly on taijutsu. I decided that I should spend some time learning ranged attacks. I felt unsure about how useful kunai and shuriken would be for anyone other than Jinin, so I put them off, leaving it to the academy to teach me. I instead decided to focus on the vacuum palm. It didn't seem to do any real damage, it just sort of pushed enemies over from what I could tell. It wasn't much, but it was heavily connected to the 8 trigrams, being called 8 trigrams, vacuum palm, so I figured I'd give it a go and see what comes of it. I had a vague idea of using the shadow clone jutsu as well, but until recently I didn't have a reason to know it. Weirdly, it seems that just about everyone knows it. If my teacher can use a shadow clone to watch the class while he takes a dump, perhaps it's not so hush-hush after all. So reason secured, I proceeded to ask the closest adult about it when I got home, which happened to be my mother. The shadow clone jutsu allows the user to create 1 or more copies of themselves. The user's chakra is evenly divided between themselves and their clones, depending on how much chakra the user has and how many clones they make. Because of this, usually, only those of at least Jonin level can safely use the standard shadow clone technique. Wow, that's probably the most she's said to me at one time. Can you teach me it, or have Takuma teach me it? She shifted forward a bit and narrowed her eyes at me. You have enough chakra. I'll show you, watch closely, tiger, serpent, ram. In a poof of smoke, a shadow clone appeared behind Mom. Okay, thanks, Okasama. I spun on my heel and left, trying to escape as fast as possible. I sat on my bed feeling weird about that whole conversation. She's never said more than a couple of words a month to me. That threw me off. Sigh. I'll think about it later. With that out of the way, I proceed to write down the hand signs and ponder my next steps and how I would find time to practice the shadow clone jutsu in my already packed schedule. Learning the shadow clone jutsu wasn't hard, as I soon found out. I figured it'd take me 2+ months to learn, but that wasn't the case. It only took me a week. It would have been shorter, but I had exhausted my chakra for the first time and ended up laying in bed for 3 days. Though I had quickly learned the jutsu, it wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. My clones couldn't slow their perception. And when I and/or a clone are performing tasks that require concentration, I'm unable to have more than a few shadow clones active at a time. Although I had enough chakra to have 5 or so active, it felt like my brainpower was being split 5 or south ways, and so 2 clones seemed to be my limit. Still, I'd take what I could get. I had hoped to swarm any future battlefields with hundreds of fast ass-kicking white-haired Hyugas, but it was not to be. Although I could only use 2 clones, that still left 2 bodies to pursue other stuff while I trained my physical body. I figured ID to get started right away and sent one of the clones to harass Takuma into teaching me the vacuum palm and another to go get scrolls for the Academy 3 and learn them. I spent some time trying to get along with my classmates with little success. Kakashi took my attempt on a friendly spar too seriously and throat punched me, and I in a moment of vengeful wrath threw him into the air and kicked him into the ground. Safe to say ID given up on young Kakashi. I and Guy, on the other hand, became fast friends. We spent a lot of time talking about taijutsu, training and sparring. My new favorite pastime was joining Guy and Dewey, Guy's father, for some after-school training. Well, the training was always silly and ridiculous, though it was working and somewhat fun, so I had no complaints. More time passed. It was about the first quarter of the year and we just started sparring. Most of the year so far was spent on ordinary school subjects such as history and mathematics. We were taught the basics of ninjutsu, the Academy 3, taijutsu, and a little bit jinjutsu. We also spent a good amount of time learning survival outside. Survival was probably the most interesting for me. It was pretty much basic bushcraft, fire starting and covering your tracks, all the stuff I had no clue about and probably wouldn't have learned had it not been mandatory. Sparring was fun for the first few days. I fought. Well, I poked my way through the other students using the gentle fist. Then the instructor started pairing me with Kakashi, and Kakashi was a little shit. He throat punched me again. Kakashi being an ass aside, he was a challenging opponent, forcing me to constantly use my bullet time and slow my perception because of how fast he could change his tactics. I had to fight in constant slow motion and constantly watch and make sure he wasn't setting some kind of trap. He got me quite a few times, forcing me out of the arena when I was too focused on fighting him, kicking dirt into my eyes and taking my feet from out under me, thus ending the fight. Overall, my academy life was going great. I made good improvements, made a friend and rival, learned the shadow clone jutsu. Things were shaping up. Sadly, it wouldn't last. I knew the third shinobi war was most likely going to happen within the next year, and I didn't feel ready. I could probably beat a standard Jinin or run from a Chunin, but I don't think I'd last against a Jonin. And that worried me. I had hoped to make more progress than this, but it was unrealistic to have expected so. I was doing fine. At 5 years old, I was about low Jinin level. I took a deep breath, trying to stop myself from spiraling into a panic. Worrying wouldn't help. I should try to awaken my Kaguya bloodline again, this time using Yang Heavy Chakra. 1-456 Chapter 3, Revised. It was the middle of the school year. Tensions were rising throughout the elemental nations, and there were whispers of war on the horizon. I sat in my room curled up in blankets and stewing in a particularly nasty fart. I was getting increasingly nervous and was making no substantial progress in medical ninjutsu nor the Kaguya bloodline, and was hesitant to dedicate more time to it. As it was, I spent very little time learning medical jutsu. Most of my time learning medical ninjutsu was just memorizing bone, arteries, vein, and tendon placement. I only had 3 actual medical jutsu to my name. Any more than that was beyond Takuma, and thus I'd have to intern or apprentice at the hospital, and that was a no-go. I didn't want to get shafted and permanently stuck in the hospital. I was also worried about what the clan elders could do when I no longer impressed them and furthered the Hyuga name. I decided to go back to brain enhancements. Although incredibly risky and without a doubt dangerous, they were something I needed. I didn't want to waste time learning time-consuming things that I could later take a glance at and remember forever with my as-of-yet theoretical memory enhancements. Course of action: decided I left my room in search of books on the brain, or more specifically memory. I'd had little to no luck finding books, so I sent my favorite teacher on a mission to find them. With that done, I bumbled about trying to find something to do with my time. I was sitting cross-legged in front of a mirror I recently had the branch members put in my room, and winking at myself and admiring my good looks. I was originally sending chakra to my eyes in small bursts varying in both size and density and among different paths, trying to discover new things about the Byakugan and maybe luckily awaken the Tensegan, but alas, I had no luck and got distracted and started admiring my exotic looks. My mother, of course, walked in while I was doing so. "Shiro, Takuma brought the books you asked for." "Well, this is embarrassing." We stared at each other silently for a moment. "Thanks, I was just admiring my good looks." More silent eye contact ensued. "The books are on the table." Would it have been less awkward if I made an excuse? Maybe honesty isn't always the answer. I was sitting on my bed, a stack of brain-related books next to me. I was currently trying to summon up the mental strength to do a possible 8+ hour study session. Sadly, it was not working, and I was once again staring at myself in the mirror. I took the mirror off the wall and turned it around so I could no longer see my reflection. That done, I proceeded back to my bed and cracked open the first book on the pile, Jinjutsu and the Brain Made Easy. Probably not what I need, but I'll take a look. Are memories stored in just one part of the brain, or are they stored in many different parts of the brain? Inogen Yamanaka began exploring this problem about 160 years ago by making lesions in the brains of animals. Finally getting somewhere after going through half of the books, I was overjoyed. I continued reading. Blah blah blah. Short-term memory occurs in the prefrontal cortex. It stores information for about 1 minute and its capacity is limited to about 7 items. Now we're cooking. Long-term memory is processed in the hippocampus of the temporal lobe and is activated when you want to memorize something for a longer time. This memory has unlimited content and duration capacity. Skill memory is processed in the cerebellum, which relays information to the basal ganglia. It stores motor skills, like using hand signs, throwing a kunai, and disemboweling your enemies. On the next page was a diagram detailing different parts of the brain. Jackpot! I couldn't keep the grin off my face. This is what I needed. I spent the rest of the day flipping through the rest of the books in case I missed something. That done, I spent the next week with my hand on my head, constantly using the diagnostic jutsu, parsing out the different parts of my brain according to the book. I also enrolled Guy to help in my brain enhancements, not that he was much help or that he knew he was helping. What do you need my help for, my most youthful friend? I just need you to sit still so I can stare at your head with my Byakugan. Yash, what are you trying to do, my friend? I'm finding ways to send more chakra to my eyes. Since I can't see the tenketsu in my head, I'm using yours. Now stay still and quiet while I draw your tenketsu. Half-truth. Yash! Shiro! Let your power of youth explode. Guy ended that sentence with a thumbs up and a sparkle in the corner of his eye. He was indeed as youthful as one might imagine. Short-term memory, prefrontal cortex. Long-term memory, hippocampus. Skill memory, cerebellum. I'd identified all the parts of my brain with the diagnostic jutsu and was ready to experiment. Late at night, I sat on the toilet, book in lap, hoping that if I fall unconscious my mother will open the door and find me the next time she has to use it. I did one last check over, deciding my pants should be around my ankles. If I was found just sitting on the toilet, it would be a tad bit odd. With that done, I took a hair-sized string of chakra from the tenketsu at the very top of the head and guided it down to the prefrontal cortex and started cycling it then back to my tenketsu while thinking that I could afford to lose some short-term memory. Nothing seemed to happen. I continued sending chakra through my brain and proceeded to read the book on my lap. Again, no noticeable success, but no failure either. I figured no success would come from my half-assed attempt, but continued nonetheless. I ran a second string of chakra to the hippocampus and repeated the process. I took a look at the book, read a few sentences, and looked away, recalling them word for word vividly right away. Success! Overjoyed with my success, I continued to flip through the book, slowing my perception, enhancing my short and long-term memory, trying to see if I could memorize the whole book. It was working. I could recall everything I'd seen and read. A grin stretched across my face only to leave as quick as it came. I snapped the book closed and closed my eyes, a headache pounding behind my eyes. I felt extremely hungry and very tired. I let out a sigh, a partial success. I put the book on the back of the toilet, pulled up my pants, and stumbled out of the bathroom, down the hall, and into the kitchen, planning to quietly have a midnight snack. After a day of rest, missing school and training in the process, I was back to experimenting late at night. Sadly, it seems, much like how shadow clones can't slow their perception, they can't use the memory enhancement as well. Even with its obvious downsides, I'd still call it a success. Though my headaches seemed to have slowly decreased the more I used it, I believed I wouldn't ever be able to permanently use it. It didn't allow me to view memories, only creating very vivid new ones. the short-term memory enchantment only seemed to work with the long-term enhancement and vice versa. The skill memory enhancement has yet to be tried. The book claimed that the cerebellum is responsible for learning and memorizing new motor skills like katas. I believe that the Sharingan move copy thing probably had something to do with this part of the brain as well. I had high hopes that I could run around copying moves like I had a Sharingan, but like the long-term memory enhancement didn't make pre-existing memories clearer. The same most likely applied to the skill memory part of the brain. I spared a minute of thought on what I would name my memory enhancements, but came up blank. I decided to end my night and perhaps come back the other memory enhancement later, maybe after ID burned some medical texts into my brain. A few weeks passed. I was in my much too large classroom, in the protagonist's seat, burning a book about the respiratory system into my brain, no longer experiencing a headache for a couple of minutes of use. I had made explosive progress in memorizing the medical books needed to use medical jutsu, compared to before when it took 6 months to memorize what is now 3 weeks memorization. It was extremely impressive. Some would call it extremely youthful. Yes, I was very youthful indeed. I spared a second to look at Guy. Yes, most youthful. ID since added chakra scalpels to my medical jutsu repertoire, I've also started to practice something I call medical mode, which is just me circulating medical chakra around my body and speeding up my already impressive regeneration. Improvement aside, I had very little experience using medical jutsu on humans, only animals. They're pretty much the same thing, right? Left. I was sitting beside an extremely excited Guy. We were doing Konoha's equivalent of a midterm test today to decide who moves up a grade, who goes down, and who stays where they are. I believe this is when Kakashi advances to the final grade to join what must be Obito's and Rin's class. I might advance as well. I've got some impressive taijutsu, average ninjutsu, impressive medical jutsu, but very mediocre written grades, as I never really paid attention and sometimes stopped halfway through assignments, handing them in half blank when I got bored. The written test was alright. If an answer took too long to write, I'd half-ass it. I couldn't be bothered to explain my reasoning, mainly due to general laziness. I decided that I'd leave my advancement up to fate, and not try my hardest on the written test. The tests were soon collected, and the next part of the test started. We went through some physical exercise, the teacher marking when a student dropped out. That finished, we were led back to the classroom, most of the class sweaty and miserable looking, Kakashi, Guy, and I standing out looking rather unruffled. The final test started. Slowly person after person left the room, some returning, some not, and midway through it was my turn. I was brought into a cleared classroom and made to stand in front of a group of 3 teachers. They made me go through the Academy katas, then the Academy 3, and told me to go to room 2A, which I guess meant I passed and had been moved up. I walked into my new classroom and stared at a brawling Kakashi and Obito, who could only have been Rin, tried to break up the fight with no success. I ignored whatever that was and looked towards my favorite seat, only to find it already taken by a brown-haired average Joe nonetheless. I refocused back to the Hataki/Uchiha brawl and started thinking about ways to get average Joe to give up my seat. I was scared out of my thoughts by a loud, "Break it up, brats!" from directly behind me. Note to self, perhaps don't stand in doorways. 1:456 Chapter 4, Revised. It's been 3 weeks since the Academy's midterm. I of course passed. Guy did not. Guy was extremely upset. A river of youthful tears streamed down his face, and he'd promised to train 10 times as hard to catch up to his most youthful friend. I asked Guy if he wanted me to wait for him so he could catch up to me, as I didn't mind doing so. Guy answered with a youthful no. We had a rather touching moment. Don't let anything stir you from your path you have drawn for yourself. Forge ahead until the end. Stick to it, Shiro. Make me proud. Be everything you can be. Guy finished it with his nice guy pose, a thumbs up, and a sparkle on his teeth. Thanks, Guy, that was extremely youthful. I returned my nice guy pose, a double thumbs up. Youth is infectious. I stood alone in the center of training ground, 3 white-haired lightly blowing in the breeze, this training ground was the training ground the current third Hokage trained the Sannin, and where Kakashi will train his future team. I figured that since this training ground birthed and will birth legends, that maybe some of that would rub off on me. I recently wrote all I could remember from the Naruto timeline, only to immediately trash it afterward. I figured that my presence has probably changed things and I shouldn't count on what I had seen to be accurate, seeing as it was 10-ish years away anyway. I didn't need to worry for a while. I instead decided to make a timeline and burn it into my brain. Though Kishimoto himself didn't know the timeline, I thought I'd give it a shot. I put my birth about 15.5 years before the Ninetales attack. B&T. Guy, Rin, and Obito were at 17 B&T. Kakashi is about 2 to 3 years younger than them, so 15 B&T. Kakashi graduates at 5, I put that at 9 out of 10 B&T. I wasn't sure. Obito and Rin graduate at 9 years old, 5-ish B&T. Kakashi becomes Chunin, Obito does not. 5 B&T. Sumako causes war, 4 B&T. Third Shinobi War? 5 to 4 B&T. Sakumo dies, 4 B&T. Itachi birth? 5 B&T. Third Shinobi War for 2 years? 4 to 2 B&T. Obito dies, meets old man Madara, 1 to 2 B&T. Minato Hokage 1.5-ish B&T. Naruto conceives 0.9 B&T. And Ninetales attack 0 NTA. I figured it was at least something close to that, though I wondered what training Madara gave Obito that let him contend with the 4th Hokage in just 2 years. Although the timeline was made with half-forgotten memories and patched together with shabby detective work, I was somewhat confident that it was close. My only major problem seemed to be Itachi. I figured he was 5 to 7 years old when the Ninetales attacked, but I wasn't sure. Going by my current timeline, if Kakashi graduates this year, that means I had 4 or so years until the war. That isn't a lot of time. When I had this realization, I panicked for a while. After stewing in panic for a while, I decided that it was time to get back to work. I was standing alone in the center of what was called the third training ground, white hair lightly blowing in the breeze, half blank, but soon to be filled war monument to my back. This was the training ground the current third Hokage trained the Sannin, and where Kakashi will train his future team. I figured that since this training ground birthed and will birth legends, that maybe some of that would rub off on me. Anyway, I was here to practice the body flicker or shunshin, while a clone practiced medical jutsu on the fish in the nearby river. The shunshin was pretty much enhancing your legs with chakra while pushing chakra onto the surface of your body to eliminate drag and resistance caused by the air around us, reducing the limiters the atmosphere puts on your speed, which increasing your acceleration considerably. Not hard, which is why it is considered a D-rank jutsu. I was both normally using shunshin and using it with my perception enhancement, now aptly named Shikaku Kyoka. It is just perception enhancement in Naruto-verse Japanese. As one could tell, I was very creative. Using Shikaku Kyoka allowed great control during shunshin. Being unable to control the shunshin was the reason ninja didn't use it in combat. The exceptions being Shursui with his Sharingan and possibly the Raikage with however he slowed his perception. I believe the Raikage's lightning armor was a shunshin lightning release combo. I hope to achieve the speed both Shursui and A will be known for. But I was having little luck. It seemed I wouldn't get instant speed. My first problem was that the shunshin was tearing. Easy peasy. Just build up my stamina, something I could do, though it was something that took time. My second problem was that using the shunshin only took my speed up to high Chunin level, which was a great increase as it was mid-Genin level before. I had expected I instantly jumped to Jonin speed, but I guess my expectations were too high. Again, the solution was simple, I just had to build up my base speed. No problem. So, the solution to my problem seemed to be training. Which was great as I loved simple solutions. What was not great, however, was that any bodily training I was doing wasn't as effective as before. I simply wasn't improving as fast as I once was. There's a limit to a 5-year-old's body and it seems I've about reached it. This is what caused me to think of the shunshin in the first place. And although I already had another solution, it wasn't one I was happy with. Trying to stimulate or activate the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland releases the human growth hormone which controls the physical growth of the body. I certainly didn't have good enough medical knowledge to do so safely, and I didn't want to grow to 7 foot tall and look like Sloth from the Goonies. I thought the body did good enough on its own. I decided perhaps I should visit an expert. The good thing is I knew the most youthful expert in Konoha. Popping my clone and absorbing its memories, I set off in search of said expert. My trip to said expert was delayed, as he was out of Konoha on a mission. I instead sought out Takuma, the next best but least youthful expert I knew. My trip to Takuma was also delayed. A branch member told me that I had to attend a meeting with Elder Kakuzo tomorrow. It seems that I won't find an answer to my problems today. Or tomorrow for that matter. I didn't know what the elder wanted, or who he was. I hoped fate would be merciful and I would not be ganged up on and sealed. I was paranoia given human form. I had faith I could kill a couple of people before they sealed me, maybe make them think twice about future sealings. First, before any drastic action was taken, I had to go ask my mother who this Kakuzo was, and see if she knew what he wanted. As she was the child of an elder, I figured she might know who he was and what he wanted. I arrived home and the moment of truth came. Mother, Elder Kakuzo requested my presence tomorrow. Thanks, very helpful. Could you tell me who he is? I'm unfamiliar with the name, I asked. She slowly blinked at me and I blinked back in reply. The former clan head. Do you know what he wants with me? She blew a breath out of her nose, looked away, and said, Clan members are taught more about the Byakugan when they are deemed responsible enough. I held back a relieved breath from escaping my mouth and enjoyed the feeling of tension leavening my body. I mumbled a quick thank you Okasama and scurried away, wanting to escape to my room. I heard a muffled dress nicely tomorrow as I closed my door. I always dress nicely. And by nicely, I meant youthfully. When I tried to leave the next morning, I was stopped by my mother and promptly told to leave my youthful green jumpsuit at home. I went back to my room without argument, putting on a black and gray yukata and finally leavening the house under my mother's approving gaze. But the joke was on her. Halfway to the elder's house I shed my yukata, revealing my youthful jumpsuit for the world to see. You may be able to slow it down, but you cannot stop the power of youth. I arrived at the elder's house, knocked on the door and waited. A branch member opened the door, stepped to the side and made a motion for me to enter. After taking off my shoes, I was led down the hall to a room and told to wait. I had a quick look around, admiring the calligraphy that hung on the wall, and then seated myself at the shibudai. After very little time an old man with brown hair walked in, and then paused to admire my youthful attire, but then continued and sat cross-legged at the shibudai. Let's get started, I have better things to do than teach you. He sneered at me. Asshole. I, being a youthful gentleman, pleasantly smiled back. Yes, elder, let's not waste your time, after all, you don't have much left. HMFP, unlike the Sharingan, which do not manifest unless the users meet certain conditions, the Byakugan is present from the time of birth. The elder blabbered on, totally ignoring my verbal jab. Unlike a Sharingan that has been transplanted, the Byakugan when trained can be activated and deactivated at will, making it highly coveted, more so than the Sharingan. Ah! Something I didn't know, maybe this will be worthwhile. Wielders of the Byakugan have a near 360-degree field of vision around themselves, save for a small blind spot at the back of the neck. I've changed my mind. The Byakugan's vision can penetrate almost any object, allowing users to see through walls, peer underground, or even examine the contents of a person's body. Only certain barriers can block a Byakugan's sight. The elder paused and took a sip of tea that was provided by a branch member while he was talking. We use one of these barriers in every house in the compound for privacy. The elder set his cup down, took a deep breath, and continued. Users of the Byakugan can focus their vision on anything and everything within the Byakugan's range, allowing them to monitor individuals from out of range or to quickly survey a vast area and pinpoint specific locations. I'm not the only one that learned the telescopic vision, it seems common actually. The exact range of the Byakugan varies between users but can be improved with training. The Byakugan can see chakra to a greater degree than the Sharingan. I felt a tinge of disgust at the smug look on his face when he said it. This enables users to distinguish clones from their original and even identify specific individuals' chakra signatures. The Byakugan's ability to see chakra is acute enough to see the chakra pathway system within a target's body and the 361 tenketsu that run along with it. Our clan devised the gentle fist style of combat specifically to take advantage of this ability, wherein they strike an opponent's tenketsu to either seal or forcibly open them, thus giving the user complete control over their opponent's chakra. I waited for him to continue, but it seems that was it. Any questions? Perhaps not. Yes, Elder, what's the average range of the Byakugan? The range of the Byakugan varies, sometimes being 22 meters and sometimes being 20 kilometers. That's not really what I asked, but okay. Time to get out of here. Still seated, I lightly bowed at the waist. Thank Elder for expanding my horizons. May I be excused? Yes, leave my house, he shooed me with his hand. I stood up, gave another small bow, and started to leave. I figured I'd already dug myself a hole, it didn't matter how deep it was anymore. I continued on my way, throwing one last jab over my shoulder as I left. Thank you, Elder. I admire how you don't care about how you come across. Rudeness causes me to behave most unyouthfully. 1-456 Chapter 5, Revised. The day after I met with the Elder, I went and sought out Takuma, searching for answers to my lack of physical progress. The answer was disappointing. Apparently it not necessary and detrimental for 5-year-olds to bulk up. I was told to wait a few years, improve and expand on my techniques while continuously training, and that I'd get stronger naturally. It was not what I wanted to hear, but probably what I need to hear. I forgot I was considered 5 years old, and what I had done was impressive enough. I decided to shrink my physical training schedule a bit. I didn't need to train my body in all my spare time. I decided that it was time I finished my third memory enhancement and discovered the limits of my regeneration, something I had been putting off for a while. I was back in the third training ground, mutilating myself with a kunai in the name of science. Although there was no actual science being done. I decided to do the hardest thing first so as not to put it off farther. I discovered some useful things about my regeneration. It seems that all cells in the wounded area become super active and duplicate themselves at an insane pace. I don't understand how they don't become cancerous or how they know what they should and should not repair. This process is a tad bit similar to the cell activation jutsu, something used to increase a patient's survival rate during risky surgeries, though in my case it was completely automatic. The natural tearing of muscles for some reason don't heal until I'm at full rest and taking a break. Any cuts, punctures, and deep gashes healed very quickly. It took about 30 seconds for them to disappear. Any chunks of flesh taken from the body took a little longer, clocking in at about 1 minute. And at increased chakra cost. Broken fingers healed the quickest, doing so about 15 seconds after they had been realigned. Foreign objects will be pushed from the wounds before healing is completed, not mattering if you seal the top of the wound to prevent exit. Foreign objects must exit the body for healing to start. I did the same with medical mode active and it was a great success. Wounds healed as they were created, at a huge cost in chakra though. A finger I cut off with a chakra scalpel did not regrow, but when placed back against the stump it healed very quickly. I assume that it's the same with other limbs, but I don't dare to try. After cutting my finger off I was at my limit of what I could do and decided that was it for the day. All in all, my regeneration makes 0 sense. I'd call this a very traumatizing but successful day, definitely not something I will do again. It's been a week since I was the last experimenting with my healing. I couldn't muster the will required to do anything but my normal training until now. So again, here I stand in the third training ground. this time running through katas while cycling a fine thread of chakra through my cerebellum to enhance my skill memory. I then went through my katas again, this time with any enhancement. It seems it worked, though I'm not sure how well. I was already very familiar with the Hyuga set of katas. That's annoying. So again, here I stand, this time running through the Academy katas, my only other known taijutsu style, while cycling a fine thread of chakra through my cerebellum. I stopped my enhancement and then my katas. I started the katas, becoming annoyed with myself that I hadn't got it right the first time. Okay, it was definitely much better. Like the other enhancements, it didn't make existing memory better, just cemented memories done during the enhancement, in this case, skill memory. The problem I hadn't considered was that I wasn't just burning the kata into my mind, I was also burning any flaws I made into it as well. Not a huge problem, I just had to get the movements right, then enhance my mind. The other problem I had considered was that I need the necessary muscle to go through any motion learned this way. There would be no doing it once and knowing it forever. But it would be pretty close, and that was enough. I sent 2 clones off to do as they please. I was headed to the clan library, looking for the next set of books to burn into my brain. In the time between my last training and now, I had come up with a name for my memory enhancement. I, being too lazy to make a name for each one, decided on one name to rule them all. Kokoro no Kyoka, or Mind Enhancement in Naruto-verse Japanese. Very creative. And not at all similar to Chikaku no Kyoka. Nope. I arrived at the library, nodded to the guard, whom I see often, and had become familiar with, and continued in. The Hyugas had a wealth of information, jutsu scrolls stashed in cubbies, shelves lined with books of all sizes. It was sadly a disorganized mess, no labels, often no titles on the books. Some of the books were just loosely stacked papers with a string holding it together. As I said, a mess. There was no system here. Sure, everything was maintained and taken care of, but only the staff knew the location of any specific book or scroll. Knowing that from experience, I went to my favorite staff member and asked for what I needed. The staff member recommended an additional scroll, so I took that as well. I took a seat at a nearby table and started burning my first scroll and original goal into my mind. Earth Release, hiding like a mole jutsu. This technique changes earth into fine sand by channeling chakra into it, allowing the user to dig through it like a mole. This effect goes around the body, making it just large enough for a person to move through. The user can pinpoint where they are, despite being underground, by sensing the magnetic forces. The user can also sense what is happening on the surface and use that information to launch a surprise attack on the enemy. One can also hide deep in the ground, escaping to a depth where the enemy can't reach. The ground returns to normal after the user's chakra has dissipated. That done, I open the second scroll. Earth Release, Drill Rending Fong. The jutsu was a copy of the hiding like a mole jutsu. The only difference was that you launched yourself out of the ground using a variation of water walking and body enhancement. I burned that into my mind as well, figuring it might be worthwhile if I was already learning a similar technique. That done, I headed off to seek out Takuma, hoping to get some advice on earth-nature transformation. Takuma was useless, a new trend it seems. I was told my time was better spent elsewhere, and I should put off nature transformation until I had a Jonin sensei. Takuma had become less help the more things I mastered, although he still has things to teach me at the moment. I might need to look into interning at the hospital. I need experience working with the human bow. My thought was interrupted by one of my clones dispersing. I needed some practice healing the human body. I had hoped to get some during the war, but that was too far off. And if I were to need to leave the village, I wouldn't be able to complete my medical jutsu repertoire. To make any more progress, I had to learn from a professional. Konoha kept most of its medical techniques among the trustworthy high-ranking medical staff. The clan had to pull some strings to get me the medical books I had. A point in their favor. They're still assholes that enslave their family. But so am I. I hadn't done anything to help the branch family. My thoughts were interrupted again by a new influx of memories, this time from the second clone. One clone had hinged into my old teacher, the forgettable-looking Chunin, and had gone to the library to sneak a look at some scrolls restricted to Chunin, mainly in the hopes of finding more stuff on chakra control. The second clone on the hand had gotten into some trouble. The second clone decided that since his life was short, and he didn't have to deal with the consciences of his actions, he should have a grand old time. The clone's idea of a good time was egging the Yamanaka residents, hinged as Kakashi. He had been caught in the act by some patrolling ninja, so he egged them too. Deciding that there wasn't any reason to stop, he slipped the ninja and bought more eggs. Egged the Akamichi clan head's house. And for the sake of completion, he got a passing Nara as well. All he got was a troublesome in reply. His rampage was about over. His last act was sneaking into the Hokage tower hoping to egg the Hokage. Alas, he did not make it. He was assassinated when he ran past the receptionist. I sighed. Something new I figured out. You can leave a connection to clones to check up on them and manually control them when needed. It was completely optional. It is mostly used to share thoughts and cooperate when fighting. I had foregone this link today, figuring I'd need my full focus. That was a mistake. I'm glad the Rouge clone had the foresight to make its shenanigans Kakashi's problem. The unlikable bastard. I wish everyone he loved could die a little faster. It did wonders for his personality and canon. That was uncalled for. I massaged my eyes with my finger and thumb. I was getting grumpy. Perhaps it's time to turn in for the day. I was roof-hopping back towards the library, hinged as my forgettable academy teacher. I noticed a bald old man with a huge beard, breaking from the crowd. His hand on his chest like he was having a heart attack. I stopped and stared at him. He stumbled down an alleyway and dropped to his knees, panting and seemingly having trouble breathing. I looked back at the crowd. No one seemed to notice. I jumped across the street onto a rooftop and down into the alley where the old man was. "Are you all right, Aji-chan?" I said sweetly. Sweat was dripping down his forehead and he seemed to be barely holding it together. "Call me a Mednin." He looked me in the eyes, blue met white. "Yes, Ajikin." I smiled. I held his gaze for a breath, leaned in, and said, "You're a Mednin." I said as seriously as I could. I met his disbelieving eyes, feeling rather proud of myself. "And no, I meant, call a med." I ended his sentence with a poke to the neck, knocking him out. I was just yesterday thinking about how I needed to practice my medical jutsu. A heart attack was no biggie. I dragged him farther down the alley and into the shade of the building. I knelt, activating my Byakugan, then chakra scalpels, and focusing on his heart. A few of his coronary arteries had become blocked with cholesterol buildup, something that commonly happens over time in people. I put my hand to his chest, scalpels passing through, leaving him unharmed. I was about to activate the tip of the chakra scalpel to clear the buildup when I felt a small resistance. His meager chakra was trying to eject my own. Not a problem, I just had to change my chakra to match his own. I did so while increasing the density of my chakra at the same time. Nice, his chakra was no longer fighting mine. I activated the scalpels and cleared the blockage one by one. That done, I used the mystical palm on his heart just in case I missed anything. I took a look around with my Byakugan, looking for witnesses. Clear. A job well done. My impromptu heart surgery was complete. I ran up the wall and started towards my original destination, pondering what I had learned and how I could apply it in the future. Chapter 6, Revised. I was seated in the library, reading a book about birth control, not material for a normal 5-year-old, which was why it was in the Chunin section. The first birth control seal was located on the pubis, and sealed semen away, a great invention for the ninja world. Sadly, all the semen exploded out of the seal upon deactivation. Deactivation, in this case, meant death. So, for a while, men when killed on the battlefield would explode in a shower of semen, coating enemies and allies alike. Needless to say, The seal was no longer in circulation. I got kicked out when I laughed like a maniac while reading it. I'd applied for a position in the hospital and was denied. I imagine they didn't even take the time to consider my application. I was after still 5 and not yet a genin. I decided that was fine. I got to practice my medical jutsu on that old man anyway. I learned a valuable lesson that I'm glad I didn't have to learn in an emergency. The body will fight foreign chakra. It wasn't a problem with the old guy, he had barely any chakra. A ninja on the other hand would have a ton of chakra, and it would be quite the shock if their chakra had lashed out at me. I put it out of my mind and went back to my training. I was in my favorite training ground using shunshin on my arms and flinging kunai at a tree. It was going alright. I had wanted to slash my enemies with chakra scalpels faster than they could react. But I couldn't use shushin on my arm with chakra scalpels at the same time. There were too many things to focus on while doing so, especially when using Chikaku no Kyoka with it. If I dropped my Chikaku no Kyoka I could manage, but then I was just swinging my arm around faster than I could react. And that was a no-go, so I was throwing kunai, something I had Takuma teach me properly so I could burn it into my mind. It worked well. My arms would get tired after a while, but that was fine. Stamina would come with time. The kunai were flying like they had been thrown by a jonin. I imagined most people wouldn't even see them. I quite liked the idea of staying in the back and tossing kunai at my enemies while my fellow Konohanin run headfirst into the meat grinder that is a battlefield. I still don't think highly of throwing weapons. Most jonin could probably swat my kunai out of the air. But this will be useful against cannon fodder. Something so I don't have to waste much chakra fighting. I can just pelt them to death with kunai before they arrive. Yep, that's the plan. Now I have something else to add to my training, throwing weapons. I spent my days training my existing jutsu, and soon the academy graduation was slated to happen in 2 months. I had many options for my graduation. I could join a team with a jonin sensei. I could become a medical nin and work at the hospital. I could apprentice under a jonin or a special jonin. I could apprentice under a Hyuga jonin. Or I could do some combination of the above. The second last was highly recommended by the clan elders, and by recommended, I mean implied. Though I decided I had to leave Konoha, so whatever choice I had to make it had to be the most useful. I had many reasons for leaving. I wanted to limit my interference with the Rookie 9 and get away from the Hyuga clan. I also wanted to somehow get to the moon and implant my eyes within an Otsutsuki. I figured that the Kaguya clan's bloodline and the Hyuga clan bloodline, 2 bloodlines descending from Kaguya Otsutsuki, combined would awaken the Tensigen. My assumption was because of my giant chakra reserves for my age and that both my skin and hair were very close to Otsutsuki white. I had the classic Otsutsuki features only lacking horns, sadly no Tensigen for me. I remember that when the last Otsutsuki on the moon descended he stole a pair of Byakun and over some days awoke the Tensigen after he implanted them. I had given up on awakening it on my own. So maybe someone else can awaken them? Anyways, I knew I had to leave. I had so many things to do before I could though. I wanted to get my medical ninjutsu up to snuff. Or if it even possibly find some way of purifying my bloodline, making me more Otsutsuki. I wanted to learn my chakra nature and fling some ninja magic around. I wanted to participate in the war, both to develop a reputation and get experience. I wanted to avoid Danzo and his hard-on for dojutsu. I had a ton of things I wanted to do and no idea nor plan on how to do them. Sigh. I'll start on what I can do now, nature transformation. I was in my favorite training ground. I sent out a henge clone to find some chakra paper. I had tried getting some from the clan on many occasions earlier. Ninjutsu was apparently beneath the main house. Sigh. Who didn't want to fling ninja magic? Idiots. My clone came back when I was mid-fight with another clone. Me dogging and weaving, my clone trying to stab me with a kunai. We stopped, blinked at each other, and the clone dispersed, giving me the memories it acquired during its short life. I looked at the clone holding the chakra paper, and he looked back smugly. That's not good. Smug clones meant trouble. I dispersed the clone, watching a paper bag the clone had somewhere on his body drop. I breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily no shenanigans occurred today. The clone was simply enjoying that he was going to cause me frustration. Learning nature transformation could take years. He found a lovely passage in a book on nature transformation. Shinobi have an easier time learning to create and control a chakra nature that matches their affinity, although even then it may take many years. Fantastic, another huge time sink, just what I wanted. Will I have time to learn Earth nature transformation as I wanted? I picked up the bag the clone dropped and opened it. A single surprisingly large sheet of chakra paper. I could probably give some to Guy. Yep, that's the plan. Course of action decided. I folded the sheet and cut it with a chakra scalpel. I put one half back into the bag, and the bag into my ninja pouch on my leg. The only chakra nature I didn't want to have was water. I held the paper between my fingers and channeled chakra into it. The paper was wrinkled. Lightning, nice. I've been trying for 2 weeks to turn my chakra into lightning with no luck. So, I decided to find someone who uses lightning jutsu so I could get a good look at what they're doing. When I had given Guy the chakra paper, we found out he had a dual affinity for fire and lighting. So, I figured Dewey might also have a lightning affinity. You see, the reason didn't perform well was because he was training his use of the 8 inner gates almost every night. The 8 inner gates caused prolonged weakness after use, making him too tired to perform ninjutsu and jinjutsu. My assumption was right. Although Dewey only knew basic lightning release, that was fine. I was only after the nature transformation. I activated my Byakugan and Kokoro no Kyoka. I watched Dewey run through hand seals and use a D-ranked lightning release. I watched as his chakra vibrated. His chakra was then converted directly into electricity. Lighting covered his palm. Lightning Palm was a very apt name. Sadly, I was no closer to doing so myself. Thanks, Dewey-sensei. But at least I had some direction. Dewey gave a nice guy pose. Anytime, Shiro-kun. I was on my way into the village library's Chunin section when I was stopped. What do you think you are doing? I turned around in time to see the veins receding on my fellow Hyuga's face as he deactivated his Byakugan. I've been discovered, it seems. That's annoying. I deactivated my hinge and tried my best to look shy. I stared at my feet and mumbled something unintelligible. What? I waved him closer. He bent at the waist and leaned in, trying to hear what I had to say. I, of course, used Chikaku no Kyoka and slowed my perception. I then activated Shunshin on both my arms and legs. I then used my right hand's index and middle finger to poke him in the eyes before he could react and Shunshined away, leaving a swirl of leaves. There were 2 weeks until the graduation exam. I was in the 3rd training ground, practicing my lightning release. Not that I had any lightning jutsus to speak of. I could change my chakra into electricity. Sadly, it left my hand numb whenever I tried to use it. Did one develop a resistance to electricity the more they trained with it? Or did they just learn to guide it away from their body? Probably some of both. I looked at my hand, blue electricity arcing between my fingers. I let the electricity on my hand dissipate, and the blue electricity vanished. I stared at my hand. There was branching redness showing the path the lightning followed down my arm to my hand. I ran healing chakra down my arm, both it and my healing factor, making the feeling of pins and needles vanish. How the hell could Kakashi have a Chidori worth of electricity on his hand and not die? I looked at the sleeve of my youthful green jumpsuit. Sadly, it was also a casualty. I was running out of jumpsuits. I blew a breath out of my nose. Time to get back to it. Let's not let this jumpsuit sacrifice be in vain. I shall run 1,000 laps around this training ground. And if I cannot do that, I shall run 1,000 laps around Konoha on my hands. Thank you, Jumpsuit-san, for providing me comfort and amusement while you lasted. I will not let your sacrifice be in vain. Let my power of youth explode. The elders seemed to think that me graduating was a foregone conclusion. The word in the Hyuga compound was that the elders wanted me to apprentice under Tomka. That was not happening. I liked Takuma and all, but he had nothing left to teach me that I wanted to learn. Me defying the elders like this was going to cause me problems. If it was more than I was able to tolerate, some of the elders might have a heart attack and pass away. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that, but I was willing to kill if they made my life more difficult than it already was. I planned to stay in Konoha for the next 7-ish years. But if I had to leave, I would. Guy and Dewey were the only people I liked and worried about, but Guy would be fine for the next 20-ish years and Dewey would die the way he wanted. Protecting something he loves. I was back in the third training ground this time, surrounded by cracked earth. No, I was not practicing earth jutsu. Nor did an earthquake occur. I was building up chakra on my foot and releasing it on contact with the ground, trying to find a way to leap higher. With explosive results. I'm pretty sure this is what Tsunade does. And I found it out by accident. Though it wasn't without consequences. My leg was one giant, slowly receding bruise. The first time I did it, I was sent flying and my leg was crumpled like a tin can. Though it was worth it. My leg was good, time to go again. I anchored my left foot to the ground with chakra and brought my right down. Boom! The earth cracked. This time with only partial leg bruising. I was determined to get this useful before my graduation. I had a week left, so I had to make it count. As I watched my leg heal, I had a funny thought. This technique would without a doubt be called One for All. 456 Chapter 7, Revised. Today was my graduation. The day I got to see what team I was put on. The tests were nothing of note, a standard written test, followed by a taijutsu match against our teacher. We were then asked to perform any additional jutsu we knew. I showed off some medical jutsu, which was impressive according to one of the teachers. So, we got a couple of days off afterward. I guess they used this time to decide the teams. I dunno. Anyway, today was graduation. Kakashi was going to Team Minato, and I was hopefully going on a Jonin team, though I applied to the hospital as well. I'd see how it goes. I got Takuma to give up on an apprenticeship, though it was accidental. Who knew Takuma would be so against my youthful green jumpsuit? I just said Takuma and I should wear matching jumpsuits if we were on a team together. And he revoked his apprenticeship offer. Takuma, how unyouthful. I was sitting in the classroom, brand new headband on my forehead, watching my classmates leading one by one. Until it was only me and Kakashi. Fuck. Minato did not look like how I remembered him. He wore a standard Jonin flak jacket with blue pants and a blue shirt, the white cape thing with flames at the bottom nowhere to be seen. Oh yeah, he wasn't the Hokage yet. Nor was he the Yellow Flash. We were seated in the shade under a tree. Minato gave a charismatic grin. Alright, Team 7, why don't we introduce ourselves? Said grin meant nothing and he was met with silence. He gave a shy smile and continued. My name's Minato Namikaze, my likes are my girlfriend in training, my dislikes are making my girlfriend angry, and my dream for the future is to become the Hokage. More silence. Okay, Shiro-kun, how about you? My name's Shiro Hyuga, my likes are youthful training and my green jumpsuit, I dislike unyouthfulness and people who are not on time, my dream for the future is to become a figure that will be recorded in the history books. Kakashi-kun. Kakashi? My name's Kakashi Hataki, my likes are training, my dislikes are idiots and youthfulness, and my dream for the future is to be an excellent ninja. Okay, meet me at Training Ground 7 tomorrow at 6. And Minato escaped the awkwardness with a shunshin. So, wanna have a spar? I got a blank stare in reply. To better understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Kakashi didn't answer, he just walked away. Denied. I was at Training Ground 7. I was here 30 minutes early, as was Kakashi. That was something I liked about him. If you're not early, you're late. Something I learned in my past life that followed me into this one. Hello, I hope you didn't wait long. Okay, today we're going to spar so we can get a feel for each other's ability. Yes, Minato-sensei. Kakashi grunted in reply. What a charmer. Okay, so it is you two against me, start now. Minato disappeared into the trees. Did he want us to chase him? That's not going to happen. I don't want to chase someone through the forest. Nope, never mind. Kakashi seems to want this to be a chase. Kakashi took off after him. I just followed Kakashi at a comfortable distance. I figured he'd step on any traps in our way. I was activating my Byakugan every 30 seconds, while Kakashi through methods only known to him followed Minato's trail. Eventually, I spotted him. Back in the clearing, we started in. Sai. Kakashi. Minato is where we started. I got a nod in reply. At least I got a response. We made our way back to the clearing. A sunny grin met us as we approached. Excellent job. Now let's spar. Minato made the seal of confrontation, then attacked before we could even enter the clearing. Kakashi jumped in first, slashing at him with a short blade. I activated my Byakugan and Shikaku no Kyoka and then Sunshine behind him, trying to hit him with a gentle fist strike. Both of our attacks were rebuffed. Minato met Kakashi's blade with a kunai and smacked my wrist away. Surprised, I jumped back. Minato then grabbed Kakashi's wrist and tossed him at me. I reacted accordingly. I grabbed Kakashi, spun, and tossed him at Minato. Minato dodged and Kakashi tumbled past him. Minato raised an eyebrow at me. I raised one back at him. Kakashi tried to attack Minato while we were looking at each other. Sigh. Our spar went on for another 30 minutes. It ended with an unconscious Kakashi when Minato used his head to block one of my one-for-all punches. Sigh. I was knelt next to Kakashi and using the mystical palm on his head, I planned on healing him just enough to avoid a concussion. The rest could be done by a proper menin. Minato was standing next to us looking rather unruffled. That was well done, Shiro-kun. I'd place your taijutsu at high chunin and your chakra reserves at jonin level. You just need more experience against different opponents. Thank you, sensei. Your medical ninjutsu is impressive as well. I nodded, too busy fighting off Kakashi's chakra to reply. Your teamwork, on the other hand, needs improvement. Konoha values teamwork because... Kakashi eventually woke. He got a similar speech. Though his taijutsu was rated much lower than mine, as was his chakra reserves. Haha, suck it, Kakashi. I tried not to look smug. But Kakashi's glare said that I failed. Okay team, there's not a lot I need to teach you, so we're going to get straight into missions with some sparing in between. We were standing in front of the Hokage ready to get our first mission. This was my first time seeing him in person. Though he didn't look too old, he still showed signs of age. Minato started us off with his usual charismatic grin. Team 7 reporting for duty. Team 7, I have a very important mission for you. Kakashi perked up. Your mission is to head to the Matsuzaki residence and vanquish the weeds that have taken up residence in Miss Emiko's garden. Any enthusiasm Kakashi had must have died a quick death, as his shoulders dropped. Would you like some water, dears? Emiko Matsuzaki was a kind elderly woman who was barely making it around without her cane. Her kindness didn't make this job any less annoying though. No thanks, Miss Matsuzaki. Kakashi just shook his head. Yes, please, all this hard work is making me thirsty. Minato of course had done nothing but sit with his back to the fence and had no reason to be thirsty. Thunk! The kunai Kakashi threw at Minato showed how he felt about that. I figured Minato had enough fun at Kakashi's expense, so I went through the hand signs and summoned 3 shadow clones to pick up the pace. The work was done in no time. The look of disappointment on Minato's face warmed my heart. Want to run through some more D ranks today? Kakashi gave me a look filled with disdain. No. You sure? The faster we get these done, the sooner we can start on some real missions. Kakashi changed his tune pretty fast. Let's get this over with. We ran through 3 more missions that day with very liberal use of the Shadow Clone Jutsu. A week had gone by and we had averaged 5 missions a day. Needless to say, it was time for some C ranks. Normally it takes teams a month and a half to get through 20 D ranks. So, congratulations on completing 34 in such a short time. The Hokage took a puff from his pipe. Sadly, I must ask you to stop. We're running out of missions to send new graduates on. I stood head bowed. Sorry, Hokage-sama. The Hokage blew some smoke out of his nose, making me think of an annoyed dragon. It seems that you won't learn anything doing D-rank missions, so I'm sending you on a C-ranked one instead. Hopefully, you can develop some teamwork while you escort a merchant to the land of hot water. You're dismissed. Minato stepped forward and received a scroll. We all filed out and met at the base of the tower. Alright, we leave in 2 days. Does anyone need help packing? I shook my head. No, sensei. And Kakashi shook his head as well. Alright, meet me at the west gate at 6, I'll see you then. And Minato was off, leaving behind a swirl of leaves. Want to shop together, Kakashi? No. Well, at least he responded. Usually he doesn't. Progress? I spent my 2 free days in youthful training with Guy. After some training we took a break and went shopping for some stuff I would need. I made sure to stock up on jumpsuits as I had been running low for a while. I took the time to buy Guy some shuriken and kunai. I didn't know if he would use them, but at least he had some if he ever had the urge. After another round of training, we went to Guy's house to visit Due. Due was exhausted as he had reached a new level with the gates and was recovering in his home. I came over and repaired his body to the best of my ability, and we had a nice chat about escort missions and what I should watch out for. All in all, I had a youthful break before my mission. I was at the west gate standing by Kakashi and trying to make conversation. I was asking Kakashi if he had started nature transformation yet and what elements he had an affinity for. Kakashi wasn't interested. He walked a distance from me and sat down. Alright then. Minato arrived with the client, breaking up the awkward atmosphere that bothered me but probably didn't faze Kakashi. The merchant arrived on a horse-drawn cart that was covered in canvas and presumably filled with his goods. The merchant was fat, not an acceptable fat. He was so fat that his eyes were pushed closed by the fat around his face. He was the first fat person I had seen since my rebirth. I had to remind myself not to stare. Boys, this is Futada Yaro. We will be escorting him to the land of hot springs, specifically Yugakure. Nice to meet you, Futada-sama. Kakashi gave a shallow bow. Fatty got impatient and told us to get going. Alright, let's set off. Yes, Futada-sama. Minato was making conversation with Fatty, subtly fishing for information on what business Fatty had in the land of hot water. Turns out he was just here to offload his goods from Konoha and to get potatoes from hot springs. And some of their famed spring water if the prices were right. Predictably, the Fatty was going there for food and drink. It took us 4 days to get to the land of hot springs. Minato and Fatty had become fast friends and now are chatting like they had grown up together. Minato had taught us a simple E-rank camping jutsu so we could start fires if we needed to in the future. The land of hot springs still had its reluctant shinobi force at this time, so now and then as we made our way through their territory and into the village, I could see them jumping through the trees and patrolling the roads. Though they made me nervous, Yugakure shinobi had a reputation for pacifism, so I wasn't overly worried, though I wondered if I'd meet Haiden. Still, I figured it was unlikely. We saw Fatty off at the gate and made our way into the village after getting visitor passes. I was happy to ditch the Fatty, as I was worried that a bandit scare would give the Fatty a heart attack and we would fail the mission. Though I could treat him, I doubted the client getting hurt was good for my ninja resume. With that load off my shoulders, I was following Minato with a bounce in my step. We stopped at a 2-story building with a sign on it that had the kanji for hot springs on it. Alright, I'm going to get us a room at this inn. Kakashi, you're free to explore, just be back before sunset. Yes, sensei. Shiro, you're with me. And with that, I and Minato were off to the inn. 456 Chapter 8, Revised. It was the second day of our stay in Yudikure. Kakashi had been allowed to wander free again. I, on the other hand, had to stay with Minato. Apparently the Hyuga complained about the possibility of my Byakugan being stolen when Minato wasn't looking, so until I'm officially Chunin rank, I'm not allowed to be unaccompanied unless absolutely necessary. Whether they did this to annoy me or they were genuinely worried about me losing my eyes was a temporary mystery. Minato and I were sitting in the hot springs together. Was this Minato's idea of bonding? Minato-sensei? Yes, Shirokuen? I heard you're good at Fuinjutsu. That I am Shirokuen? Minato raised an eyebrow at me. Could you put a gravity seal on me? I could. Do you understand how they work? I did somewhat, but the information was sparse in both the Hyuga library and the public library. Yes, the seal has 50 levels, doubling your body weight every level you advance. I knew the seal had nothing to do with gravity, the author just didn't have a better name for it. That's as far as my knowledge on the seal went. Raising the level before you're ready can crush your bones, organs, and rip your muscles, if not instantly kill you. Ouch! I sat in silent thought, wondering if my healing factor could handle that. I'll do it for you, if you're sure you want it. Regardless of the slight possibility of death, I still wanted it. Yes, please, Minato-sensei, I still want it. Okay, we can do it when we get back to Konoha. It's not safe to do it outside of the village. It was our third day in the village and we were ready to set off. I had my fill of the hot springs and was ready to leave and get back to training, though hopefully with a new gravity seal. We left the village without any trouble. Kakashi seemed to be in a better mood than when we got to the village. Minato might have also felt better, though I didn't know. He always seemed happy and cheerful, so I couldn't tell. We walked in comfortable silence. I activated my Byakugan every 5 minutes, using this opportunity for training. The land of hot springs was heavily patrolled, so we wouldn't be running into Ronin or bandits, at least until we get into the land of fire. Our trip through the land of fire was peaceful as well. Without that tub of lard slowing us down, it only took us a day to travel back to Konoha. We arrived at the gate. The guards barely glanced at our papers and sent us in. Minato kindly reminded us to fill out our mission reports and have them filed tomorrow, and then we'd have 2 days off. Kakashi ran off as soon as he was able, leaving Minato and I standing at the gate staring at his back as he ran off. Minato let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his head. I feel you, sensei. Minato, when can we get that seal done? Minato hummed for a second while scratching his chin. We'll do it in 2 days, I'll come get you when I'm ready. He sent me what I guess was a goodbye nod and vanished in a shunshin, leaving me standing at the gate. I blew one last breath out of my nose and decided that today's lunch was going to be takeout. Yakitori maybe? Perhaps Guy and Dewey would like some yakitori. I spent the rest of my break training my Byakugan in my room. I didn't feel like interacting with people for a while after spending time with Guy and Dewey after 2 weeks of interacting with Kakashi on a daily basis. As Minato had said he would, he came and got me on the last day of our break and brought me to his apartment. I figured there would need to be some sort of room for sealing, as I vaguely remembered Kakashi taking Sasuke to one to seal his curse mark. But I guess I was wrong. Kushina was extremely cheerful. Before I could take my sandals off, I was picked up and brought to the couch where I was hugged and called cute. Kushina then complimented my hair, saying that she was envious of its shine and softness. I was then placed on the floor in front of her and Kushina started braiding my hair. This happened too fast for me to process and I was left feeling confused about how I should react. I decided that this was fine and that I should get used to it, as this would probably happen more in the future. Yep, totally fine. I heard Kushina ask about my shampoo. I told her I had no idea, as I didn't and I wanted this to end as soon as possible. Kushina-sama? Yes, Shiro-kun? I'm here to get a seal done, could you let me go? She blew a loud breath out of her mouth. PFFF, fine, just let me finish this braid, and call me Kushina Shiro-kun. I made eye contact with Minato, who winked at me. Yes, then call me Shiro as well, Kushina. Oh, you're so cute. I was indeed cute, I agree. I was made to sit down and have dinner with the couple. I had hoped to escape after the seal was done, but Minato must have predicted this, as he had suggested that we should have lunch before the sealing starts so as to not have empty stomachs later. I looked at him from across the table. He looked innocent, but I didn't buy it. Revenge would be had. We stared at each other for a moment. Though I did enjoy having a proper table and not a shibudai. The dinner was nice now that I was not being manhandled and had my own space, though of course, we had ramen. Kushina dominated the conversation, asking me about my life and training, what I wanted to do and learn. I answered to the best of my ability, giving a brief summary of my home situation, that I wanted to be a medic nin and that my affinity was lightning and that I hoped to learn nature transformation. She looked a bit upset when I talked about my home life, though she didn't say anything, so I left it at that. I was about to give up on the gravity seal and come back another day when Minato said we should get the sealing underway before the day ends. I looked out the window at the setting sun. Yes, let's get this over with. The seal was vaguely sword-shaped with a spiral enclosed by a circle where the pommel would be. There was a blank spot in the center of the pommel where a number would show up representing what level the gravity seal was at. I stood in Minato's bathroom looking at the mirror, eyeing my new tattoo. I had the seal put on my upper right arm just below the shoulder. It looked better than I imagined it would. With my jumpsuit sleeves, no one would see it. Perfect. I was again being manhandled by Kushina on the couch, listening to Minato explain the operation of the gravity seal. He explained that to increase the seal's level I just had to pump chakra into it until I feel the change in weight. To release the seal I have to form the rat seal or say fuin, release, and the weight will be returned to normal. Explanation done, I extracted myself from Kushina's grasp and made my way home. I feel like I might have taken Kakashi's place. Right now I seem to be the favorite student. Canon was already trashed when I was born, so what's a little more matter? I was up early in the third training ground getting ready to activate the first level of the seal before our team training. I was about 45 pounds, so when I activated the seal it should double it. I took my time to limber up and stretch. I didn't want to pull any muscles after all. I pushed chakra into the seal little by little, taking care not to accidentally jump up a couple of levels at a time. I hit the first level, thanked my past self for sitting down. If I hadn't, I would have for sure eaten some dirt. The weight wasn't heavy per se, just surprising. I was running around the training ground getting used to the new weight. I had 10 minutes until team training, so I formed the rat seal and released the seal. I then took a quick dip in the river and ran off to training ground 7. I met a grumpy Kakashi who was also 30 minutes early. "Why are you wet?" I ignored his question. "Good morning as well, Kakashi." I sat in the sun enjoying its warmth. I was mentally revising my training schedule to include training with the gravity seal. I'd have to learn how to fight and jump when my weight was increased. I'd also have to do the same with kunai throwing as well. Sigh. More stuff to do. Minato arrived in a swirl of leaves. I was still seated in the middle of the clearing, enjoying the sun. Kakashi was throwing shuriken at a target some distance away. "Okay boys, today we'll do some light sparring and then set up our schedule." He meant light sparring for him, not for Kakashi or me. It was decided that we would do 2 to 4 C ranks a month. We would either do 4 short ones over a month or 2 long ones over a month, so 2 to 4 missions per month. Mainly because I wanted to get time at the hospital. Kakashi was not happy. He snarled at me. "You are holding us back. We should be able to do more missions than that." I decided to egg him on a bit. "Kakashi, if you fan your flames of youth, nothing can hold you back." I finished with my nice guy pose, a double thumbs up with a large grin on my face. Kakashi tried to attack me, but Minato intervened and dragged him away in his shunshin. I was still in the clearing reflecting. I felt a bit regretful that I egged him on, but I couldn't have known that would set him off like that. I sighed and cracked my knuckles. Time to practice with the gravity seal. The team met up again the day after. Though this time I was under the full effect of the gravity seal. I had put a request to work under one of the medical men at the hospital. We would see how that goes when we get back, as we had another mission to go on today. Kakashi was still mad at me and hadn't acknowledged my presence. I wasn't sure if I should apologize or not. So, we sat in silence until Minato arrived. Not that it was different than any other day. Minato arrived and ignored the awkward atmosphere. So, are we doing long missions this month or short missions? Kakashi was silent, as was I. Minato decided for us. Short it is then. Kakashi and Minato went to get the mission scroll. I split up with them and went to leave some takeout in Guy's fridge. Dewey was out on a mission, so I figured I'd put some of that D-rank mission money to use. We met up at the Hokage Tower. Today's mission was a background investigation. Some rich guy wanted to know if his wife was cheating on him. A fun mission, if I do say so myself. I figured that most of the work would rely on me using my Byakugan to catch the wife in the act. Though hopefully, that wasn't the case. I figured it would be a good opportunity to train my Byakugan regardless of what happens. That's the end of this tale for now. The second installment of this story will be coming soon. If you enjoyed, like the video, because why not, and subscribe to the channel. Comment your thoughts and tell me any stories you would like to see anytime soon. Check out my other fanfictions, like What If Asta Was the Elf Air Guardian, or What If Kakashi Trained Team 7 Seriously. They're both amazing and have their own playlist you can use to enjoy the story thoroughly. And with that being said, peace.